Okay, so there are going to be a lot of things that realtors cannot tell you legally, but we are allowed to provide you with resources. So
But
this
yeah,
is Alex, licensed realtor and CPA, and I'm sitting here with.
Natalia Paulino. I'm
There
actually
are a
going to be
bunch.
working on getting my associate broker. I'm going to get that
Oh,
title. Yeah, that's my next thing.
okay. I like it. I like it. I like it. But in the real estate space, obviously there are a lot of things that buyers and sellers, homeowners in general, want to know. But by law, we are not allowed to because we cannot be.
Fair
We can't
housing
violate things like steering. We can't do anything that is discriminatory in terms of housing practice.
discrimination.
Right. If you think about it, right, in a regular course of dialogue, when you and your friends were talking before you get your license, you could talk about neighborhoods, right? Like, oh, I grew up in this neighborhood. I grew up in this
Right.
neighborhood. I know this school district. Da, 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 da. Once you get your license, it's hard to break that habit. I noticed that when I first got my license, I had to really sit there and stop and think, right? But with that said, because we cannot outright tell you, like, hey, this is like for instance, where the areas that I was working, it just so happened to be, hey, I need a Chinese neighborhood. I'm like, I can't help you with that, right? You need to do your research on what neighborhoods make sense, and I will try to work with that. So since we can't talk about it, but we can provide you some resources, I figured why not help y'all, and maybe I'll leave some of these in the description box below on things that or places that you can start looking to find information that you need.
And it's really hard sometimes, especially when people are traveling from out of state.
Oh yeah.
Because, I mean, if you grew up in New York City, you're a little bit familiar
Mm-hmm.
sometimes from borough to borough. But when you're coming completely from another state, you have no idea. And I
Mm-hmm.
think um, I feel like there should be a way that we should be able to do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like providing information, not necessarily like steering and telling people where they have to go, but at least being able to give them information.
Yeah, and it's fair. And this is where it gets interesting because not all people look for the same things, right?
Right.
So, for instance, some people are focused or in a stage of their life where literally it's just your commute, right? And if majority of people work in the city meaning Manhattan for those outside of New York City, uh, then you might be focused on, hey, like what is my commute going to look like from Monday to Friday? Because I don't want something more than 30 minutes. And if you look on a regular map, it might not be helpful, right? Because things might be about the same distance, but your commute times could be 3x, 4x, 5x, depending on what neighborhood you live in, right? Are you close enough to the train? Do you have to bus to the train? Or do you have to walk 10 miles to the train, right? Or is there a bus that'll take you there, but there are 5 transfers? This is the complexity of living in New York, right?
Yeah. I will
The
say
irony
this
here.
though.
Mm,
I will say this. The good thing about us not giving that information so much too is also like liability issues,
mhm.
right? If somebody were to say it's safe or not safe, and maybe I'm like, yes, this is actually a very safe neighborhood, whatever the case is, and like within a week of them moving in, something happens,
Right.
could that go back on me? I don't know. So I guess I could see like the benefits and like the disadvantages to what we are limited on telling clients or customers.
Right. And this varies from family to family and whatever, but like one of my investing mentors, for instance, like there are people who will invest in, well, different strokes, different folks. They'll go for anywhere from like class D neighborhoods to class A, right? But for me, he's like, look, I'm on a stage in my life when I was younger. I went with everything, right? I went bought properties in East New York. I bought it in the Bronx. I bought it wherever, right? But as I get older, I got to the point where I'm like, look, my rule now, he was like, look, I'm at a point where my limit steps is fairly simple, right? Am I okay to walk the streets at 9 o'clock at night? Right? Like, am I
Right.
gonna feel comfortable? Will I be comfortable sending my grandkids there? And that's my limit test. But some people don't care. Some people are like, look, I'm savvy, I'm whatever, fine, right? Other side will be maybe you want to start a family and maybe school district matters to you. I don't know, right? So again, based on what you need, hopefully we'll cover enough bases. If anyone has questions, reach out to Natalia. Feel free to reach out to me. And so here we go. Now, I'm going to start off first because I'm a little bit of a self-proclaimed hippie. And so as time has progressed, the storms, especially in the Northeast, have gotten worse, I guess. I mean, from that is the typical way we like to frame things. And so one thing that has not necessarily been as much of a concern is now apparently becoming more so, and that is flooding. if you look at the NAR, they are also adding what is called the flood factor, right? And one of the interesting things here is a lot of neighborhoods in the past were formed based off of whatever metric, but this has kind of thrown a curveball, and we still don't quite know how each neighborhood is going to shift and how the real estate will change over the course of time. But one thing is for sure is they do see that there is a need to account for flood, right? So if neighborhoods are prone to flooding, and by the way, this may be something that should be disclosed potentially, right? Um, is another reason why we strongly recommend that you have proper inspections done, right? And so if you want to look at a regular map, right, if we'll share it right here, we have the New York flood hazard mapper, right? So now you can look in and you can scroll in to see by neighborhood what areas are more prone to risk, what has had flooding, and things of that nature, right? Now, again, and maybe I should preface this by saying none of this information is guaranteed. There's no crystal ball. There's no, right? This is just merely for educational purposes and, not kind of any kind of investment or, financial advice by any means. So with that said, Natalia, what else do you think what other resources comes to mind when you think, research?
Yeah, so that's definitely that was a good one to cover as well. I do have people that sometimes ask me, depending on where they're moving to, about the flood zones, and some listing agents are good at providing some of that information. Sometimes they'll provide at least like the flood zone map, but not too much information again because they want us to they want the buyer to go and do their own research. Um, but I mean, for me, on top of flooding. Um, I think for me as a female too, like even the safety concerns that come up, right? Like that's important for some of the clients I speak to as well, or families. They want safety. They have safety concerns for their kids.
Off the bat, I mean, obviously, look, you could look up any resource, right? And oftentimes people are going to refer to Google. Okay, so some of the places that you could look is going to be, for instance, uh,
The
if you
precinct.
look at the arcgis.com, right? It gives you the New York City crime map, right? And so you could look it up, and there are different layers that you click. And so let me share my screen. Okay, so you could kind of see where you're seeing these reports happen, right? And you feel free to poke around and see what replies to you. Now, um, just because maybe I won't completely delve into each particular neighborhood, but obviously it's gonna be just one of those things where where's your comfort level? What are the things that matter to you most? And I do think that it behooves you to kind of make sure that you look into these things, right? Because if depending on who you are, where you are in life, and a lot of various factors, it's good to know, right? And some people don't care because maybe don't need this level of risk management, I guess, right? But I guess like how often do you have your have clients who kind of worry about this, or maybe they don't ask you, but you could tell that they've done their research.
I would say almost every customer has this on their in their thought process.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know if that's how people have always been made, or like we just have more access and more awareness about a lot of stuff that like not even just is happening locally, but like everywhere else,
Mm-hmm.
which kind of creates that fear. I feel like so I do feel like I would probably say like 99% of my clients, like yes, they have thought about it or they'll ask about it.
One of the frustrating things would be like, oh, this place is like a terrible neighborhood. I heard. When's the last time you actually checked the statistics? Like, when's the last time you actually seen, like, based off of who said what, right? I would prefer to base it off of where were the actual reports, what actually happened, like, what do we have that we can back up with data and facts. Unfortunately, as a realtor, I can't be like, listen, buddy, like this is safer than this block because of X, Y, and Z. Like I can't tell you that, but feel free to do your own research.
I have had one of my sellers tell us too, like, oh, well, actually, this is a pretty decent block. Like, it's safe, it's quiet, this and that. Like, he said a little bit more than like I could possibly say.
Hmm.
Um, but like that's another thing too, is like it's hard to say like this specific neighborhood is this or that, right? Because it can
Hmm.
even vary block by block.
Right, and that's like the never-ending interesting thing about living in New York City, right? And
Right. And
I've,
so,
mhm.
sorry, go ahead.
I mean, I noticed this in Philly as well, and Philly is very strange in that literally 2 blocks makes a world of difference sometimes, right? Um, but in New York, you're seeing that you can't just clump in boroughs together. You can't clump in even some neighborhoods together. There's a vast difference between certain neighborhoods from within a few block radius, right? And so it's interesting to see, but if you're not from there, it's hard to tell. Okay, so
I was also going to say another tip that I've used in the past is just simply like letting potential customers or clients know, why don't you check out the area at different times of the day? If you have that availability, maybe go one morning you have off and like walk around, go another time in the afternoon, go another time in the evening. I've had some of my buyers do that in the past, and that actually helped them with their decision as well without having to do, like it's very hyper local doing that way, like you got to feel for
Mhm.
who's out and about in that same neighborhood or that same block, I guess.
Absolutely. And that's actually an excellent point. And I think that is actually one of the more common things that realtors will say, right? Because you could say, look, you're gonna have to Google, or to say, what we encourage you to do is just, patrol. But essentially, go around the neighborhood. Pick different times, different days. And one of the interesting things was, I guess it's one of the things that we overlook. But one of the realtors was like, hey, do yourself a favor, try also different days of the week, right? So try morning, afternoon, evening, right? But try to revolve it around your actual schedule, and also try it during the week, like a weekday. I'm like, really? He goes, yeah, because you might realize that's like the street that you're going to potentially live in is the block where there's a massive school pickup and drop off, right? And does that cause an issue with your commute? Go find out, right? And I was like, oh, that's interesting, right? Um, so one of the, I guess, in terms
Or
of the
even
crime
the
and all this,
noise
but this,
factor.
oh, of course, right? Like
Yeah.
you might think it was quiet on a Saturday morning, but that's only because everyone's out partying Friday, Thursday, right? Um, and it's really, I mean, outside of crime or outside of safety as well, it's also like as you walk around the neighborhood, within let's say you start with the 3 blocks around the potential place you're looking to buy. How do you like the feel of the neighborhood as a whole, right? Do you get good vibes from it? Because if you're going to be there on average, if you look at statistics, if you look at 7, 10, 15 years, I would like to think that you're going to at least be comfortable ish living in that neighborhood, and that you like to feel the vibes, the right. Otherwise, what are we doing really, right? You're kind of forcing yourself to be in a place where you might not be so happy in, right? Um, so neighborhood scout it gives you a little more information, FYI. And just side note, all of these resources, obviously we have no control over the information, so it's a benchmark, but it's now by no means like an absolute guarantee of anything, right? So take everything with a grain of salt, but again, hopefully it helps. And again, last but not least, always check the neighborhood, check it out for yourself with your own eyes, with your own senses. um, but yeah, crime is definitely one of those things. And um, one of the other common things that people like to ask is school districts. And this one, now that I'm a parent, I mean, always understood to a certain level, but I don't. It really really resonates now. Now that I have children, but uh, school districts are something that, like, oh, we want to be in a good school district. I'm like, what does that mean? What does that mean exactly? By what standard? By what metric? By And so niche is one of the more common things that are used. And I
We're
said,
also in New York where it could be by language, right?
mm-hmm.
They want a school where, I don't know, their kid can learn Spanish, Russian, German, whatever the case is, French.
Yep. And that is an interesting thing because we do have dual language programs. My wife being a teacher, uh, it is fairly common, and surprisingly enough, different schools have different dual language programs. So you know, where we grew up in an era where dual language was either going to be the romantic languages like the French, Spanish, or Italian. We had one school in Staten Island that had which was a high school specifically, but they were Russian um, specific. But now that things have changed over the years, obviously we're talking decades ago. Jesus, I'm getting old. Um,
You're
Now we're in a
old.
situation, dude. I mean, as I was going through, I'm like, wait, what was the like time context? And I'm like, wait, this is decades. Jesus. But nowadays, thankfully, different areas try. Well, it appears anyway. It appears that they try to cater to like the diversity of various neighborhoods, and so they seem to want to mix it up a lot more, right? So you're now seeing obviously you have dual language Spanish. I hear more schools adding Chinese, Korean, even, and even like other languages. So it really does behoove you to figure out where you want to be and why, right? From a realtor's perspective, though, if I'm being honest, I do like to ask what their goals are, right? Why they're trying to live somewhere and what their 5, 10 year plan looks to be, right? And I'll provide them options, right? And one of the things is, let's say hypothetically, they're like, hey, look, if I'm like Alex, I'm single, don't plan on getting married anytime soon. So all I need is like a 30-minute commute to and from work. Okay, that's doable. Okay, so is there then obviously we'll go through the other things like what's your budget? What do all the other things that I think you and I, Ty, will break into. But for instance, what's your budget? What are you looking for in terms of neighborhood? Like, do you have a neighborhood that you're leaning towards, rather, right? And so we could work that out. And so if they're dating, then it's one of the things like if they mention, hey, look, we're looking to get married in the next 3 years. Well, then that's a different conversation to have. Again, what's your budget? What are your future plans, right? Because if you're going to be, let's say they have no plans of the plans of getting married, but not having kids for say 5 years. Of course, there's no guarantee. Please, guys, please don't sit here and be like, oh, but there's of course you never know. But if they're saying, look, let's say they got married at 28, 29, like, look, we don't plan on having kids to like mid 30s, man. So okay, look, then maybe it behooves you to buy a house closer to the city for ease of life, and you could still live up your young, youthful, young married life, have fun, right? But they say like, hey, Alex, I'm looking for District 26 specific. Or see, that's the difference, right? If you ask for a specific school district, that's one thing. You can't ask me for good school district, but you could say I want something in District 26. You want District 14. You want District 13, 25, whatever, right? That's a different conversation. Now, from that point, I'm like, now you can start doing like life math, and I think that's where a good realtor who understands the movements, or rather like how to plan for these things. And for me, from a tax perspective, at a very bare minimum, I say, look, try to live somewhere 2 out of 5 years. Why? Because capital gains get offset. So if you're single, 250. If you get married, 500. Right? So the beauty here is if you want to move around, please don't ever think that, especially if you are not later stage in life typically or really, really rich, you are not getting your dream house now. Right? And Natalia, I know there's a little rowdy back there, but I think that's another trap people go into, because you want that $1.5 million house in this particular neighborhood because all the things that you need and future-proofed everything, but you make $200,000. Mathematically, it's just not going to pencil out for you, right? So for me, it's a matter of figuring out what can I live with now in this stage of life, what can I afford, and can we future-proof things as we go, right? So do your research, see what you can live with, see what pain points you could manage and deal with that for now. And as you progress in life, and look, maybe it's a situation where, look, Alex, I never plan to get married. Cool, right? You can still move in as things plan along. Use these resources to see like where can you feasibly see yourself, and what is comfortable for you, what metrics matter to you, and you adjust accordingly, right? And I guess we're still waiting for folks to get quieted down there.
Yeah, crazy over here. Both sides right now. I was gonna say too, I guess another source as a parent I've learned is like Facebook groups, the neighborhoods, like doing the neighborhood Facebook group and asking questions within there, because I do see a lot of that come up when it's like, okay, my daughter is getting out of daycare now. What's a good elementary school? And then elementary school to middle school to high
Mhm.
school. They're jumping on there asking for advice. And I mean, if you want to get some real time,
Tea.
real honest and
Hmm.
honest answers,
Hmm.
those are really good spaces to do it in as well. Because I mean, some people aren't really good at doing a lot of research, but they want to get some type of advice.
Hmm.
And I know that works. I've seen it happen. And
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, it's a little
I mean,
good and bad. 'Cause then you get a little,
yeah.
like, then it's more like really personalized experiences, not like the
Mhm.
whole picture.
Absolutely. I mean, the interesting thing too is also like I found um, Reddit to be useful as well, but I feel like it's different, right? Like for instance, when we moved here, and uh, if I'm being honest, we never really paid it much mind until we had, my son. And that is the point where my wife actually started joining these local Facebook groups, especially like moms of blank 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 neighborhood, right? Or parents of blank 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 neighborhood, and and then it dawned on me. I'm like, wait, there's if that information is on those specific parent pages, then what is in my actual neighborhood? I looked it up, and there's like a handful of them, and you're like, oh, now okay, now you get like the behind the scenes drama of like what happened where with who and why, and again, take it with a grain of salt. But when I match that with everything else, I'm like, which points line up, which points do not, right? And for me, it's that like when we are looking to potentially move, right? Full disclosure, um, and I find myself in the same square one of like, thankfully I'm a realtor and I know where to find these things, but I again, if I'm looking somewhere I have no idea what that area looks like, I go right back into I really wish I could ask my realtor. I really wish I could just say, hey, how's the
I've
neighborhood?
had
Be
clients
real with me.
act like that. I've had clients that are like, oh my gosh, wait, what do you mean you can't tell me? Or, like they kind of dig a little bit more. And I was like, I can't. It's different if they kind of give me an idea.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's where I would say, like, it's a little bit different. If they're saying they want specific things, I can help a little bit more with that. But I can't be the one telling them, this is where you go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, what the way I break it down is usually I'm not allowed to by law because it come off as discriminatory and it violates fair housing practices, at the very
Yeah.
least. And so they're like, oh damn. I'm like, so what? So usually the way, oh Jesus, hold on. And I guess it goes right back to that. Usually when I go through these iterations, I'm like, hey, look, what I can do is provide you with some of these links and resources for you to do your own research. Now, if let's say there are certain things, whether it be like of certain train lines that you're looking for, or uh, specific school districts, for instance, then yeah, like hey, we could have that conversation. Like, hey, Alex, I'm looking for something specifically in this school district along this train line. See what you could do. Okay, but yeah, like good, bad, specific races or age groups, or I can't help you with that, right? I can't give you that. I can't give you that information outright, but I could tell you where to look, right? Um, and I think I I'm kind of glad that we have realtors like yourself, Natalia, because uh, there's it's sometimes it is a very sticky conversation to have, right? Of like some people will try to press you and be like, "Come on, it's just us two here. Like you could tell me." I'm like, "Sorry, but you're gonna have to. I'll send you the links, right?" Like it is strange because
It's
I
true.
mean, yeah, I mean,
But then you have those people that don't care
mm-hmm,
as well, and they will say like they don't have a filter and they're just talk like other agents, I guess you would say.
mm-hmm,
And that's just kind of alarming because I'm like, ooh, that's I don't know.
yeah,
I'm 100% about like being careful because I don't want anybody to feel discriminated against, or feel like we're violating fair housing and whatever the case is. And there's
mm-hmm,
just some people like they really don't care.
right. I mean, it gets strange, right? I mean, it becomes a very potential sliding scale. But for instance, from like coming from an immigrant family, I can understand where, you know, my parents when they first moved to the states, they wanted to be among other Korean families. Why? Because there's some level of familiarity, and there's back when back in my day, uh, but back where when my parents immigrated, the Korean community wasn't that big, right? And so having some sense of home, some sense of community where they have commonality, I can understand that, right? And so for me, it's happened along my career, and obviously in the real estate space, it hasn't been that long, but still enough to be where I feel sometimes I do feel bad, right? Where it's someone coming in, is like, oh yeah, my parents don't speak that English that great, and we're looking for this particular ethnicity or nationality. Could you find them a place in this, in neighborhood that has these type of people? And in those cases, it's like, look, my heart bleeds for you, because like I understand the struggles that my parents had and the reasons why they had
Right.
those struggles, and I want to help you, but I can't outright tell you what these neighborhoods are, right? And so hopefully this
Maybe we
will,
need a disclosure form for that they can sign up and like I specifically asked for this, you know,
yeah. And I mean, it might make things easier, right? I mean, maybe there is,
because it makes
but
sense in that scenario. It makes sense. It
right,
makes sense from somebody that's like coming in from somewhere where they have no idea where they're moving to, you
of
know,
course, and
and like people get surprised when like they feel like that should be part of our job, right? Like we are
mhm,
familiar with the neighborhoods. We know a little bit more than they would know. So like it's weird that we can't provide that information. I guess it's
mhm,
people before us messed it up for us, right? Because they did it
mhm,
with the wrong intention.
mhm,
But when you look at the good side of it, like the good intentions, the reasons, other reasons that make sense, we can't
right,
do anything about it.
absolutely. You know, I I think, I mean, this is where I guess I'm, in a way, I'm grateful that they at least left this little loophole open, I guess, right? And that you can't tell them, but you can at least tell them where to look, right? And so
Provide
thankfully
the
there are,
resources.
yeah. I mean, it's, I can understand it's still frustrating for some. They're like, I can't believe you just had me go through all this work and you just sent me a link that told me the same thing. Yeah, but again, I'm trying to continue to have this career path forward and not potentially get stuck in a situation where I lose my license, right?
Yeah,
Um,
it's basically like how I feed my family. So
yeah.
yours is no more important than mine, right?
Fair enough. You know, um, is there any other? Well, I think this is a good starting point, right? And I think
Right.
going forward, if anyone has any specific needs, um, I will say first off, unfortunately, Google is your friend. Um, but if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to Natalia or myself. Natalia, why don't you tell folks where to find you?
Yeah, you can definitely find me on Facebook. It's just Natalia Paulino, and then again on Instagram, Natalia Paulino Realtor, and I am on YouTube as well. So three different
Oh,
platforms.
snap.
Might be jumping on TikTok soon a little bit more.
Well, I'll leave that down all below. Um, and damn, 30 minutes have flown by. So with that said, thank y'all for joining us, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.